What is going on at that crazy ballet school?
Who is walking around the building at night?
And would you quit with the snoring already?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Friday.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
On Frenzy Frights, we're going to talk about horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts.
Chris, what movie are we talking about today?
Thank you very much, Professor. We've got a good one. We've got Suspiria. This was from 1977. It was directed by Dario Argento. Screenplay was by Dario Argento and Daria Nicoldi. It was based on Suspiria De Profundis by Thomas D. Quincy. For our cast, we have Jessica Harper starring as Susie Bannion. We have Stefania Cassini as Sarah Sims, Flavio Bucci as Daniel, Eva Oxen as Patricia Pat Hingle, Alida Valley as Miss Tanner, and Joan Bennett as Madame Blanc. Forgive me if I messed up any of the pronunciations. For our music, we had music by Goblin and Dario Argento. The release date of this movie was February 1st, 1977 in Italy, and we have a running time of 99 minutes. Well, here we go. Prof, can you please give us a brief synopsis of the movie, and then we will follow up with our own thoughts.
You betcha. So brace yourselves. I'm going to spoil the whole movie and some triggers for blood and guts. Susie Bannion is a ballerina and goes to Germany to study at the Tanz Academy. She arrives in a cab in a rainstorm, but as she does, there's a woman leaving, talking and maybe shouting to someone inside. Susie overhears some of the conversation, and we hear some of it as the movie goes on, but it means nothing to her. The woman leaves in the rain. Susie rings the intercom to tell the school she's arrived, but the voice on the other end tells her to leave. Eventually, she does leave and stays in town for the night. We follow the woman who left the academy, Pat. She runs through the woods and goes to a friend's apartment, but that night she gets attacked by an arm with a knife, and she is hung, crashing through the Tiffany glass ceiling art. Her friend is also killed in the debris. The next day, Susie returns to the school and sorts out all the confusion. The administration had no idea that she had arrived the night before. We meet Madame Blanc, who runs the school, probably because she looks similar to Elizabeth Collins Stoddard from Dark Shadows, but, she's not. Oh, well, Blanc says, we don't have a room for you. Can you rent a room from Olga? Sir, they sort that all out. At least we don't have to visit the bursar after all. Who was that woman leaving the school last night, Susie asks. Oh, that was just Pat Hingle. No relation to Commissioner Gordon, Pat Hingle. She was expelled from the school yesterday. Weird. Just a few hours later, she was killed by a madman. Yeah, that is weird. Susie goes in to meet the other dancers. So she rents that room from Olga, and when they speak, she remembers that Pat had said 2 words while she was leaving. Secret and irises. Susie is heading to her first class when she gets blinded by a light from a shard of mirror and she hears the cry, "Witch, witch!" She makes it to class but is weirded out and is not well. She passes out. When she wakes, she's in a room in the school and the doctor, Professor Vertigas, gives her a shot and puts her on a diet which includes wine to build up the blood. They decide to move Susie into the school and she leaves Olga's place. Susie finds maggots in her hair and all over her room. Turns out there was some bad meat being stored in the attic and the whole dorm floor needs to be evacuated and fumigated. It's going to happen tomorrow. But in the meantime, they'll set all the girls up on cots in the gym with sheets separating them from the others. While they're settling down, a strange woman's shadow can be seen settling into a cot. She snores very specifically. Susie's friend Sarah says that she recognizes the snore. It's the directress of the school. Susie and Sarah listen to the snore and kind of study it. The next day, the blind piano player for the dancers, named Daniel, is bringing his service dog to work, and the dog attacks a kid. They blame Daniel for the attack, but he rejects that and says the kid must have harassed the dog. So they fire him, and he is angry. Susie, because she fainted, is on a restricted diet, but they insist on giving her wine. She drinks it and gets sleepy. Sarah is in her room, and they hear footsteps of the teachers leaving the school for the night. But in her stupor, Susie realizes that the teachers are going the wrong way to go out the front door. If they count the footsteps, we can figure out where they're going. But Susie falls asleep while Sarah counts footsteps. That night, Daniel and his dog walk home after a night of lederhosen bitch-slapping burlesque. And if that sounds weird, watch it and tell me I'm wrong. They're first attacked by the soundtrack, but then the dog attacks, gives a little assist to the soundtrack, and kills Daniel in the plaza. Killed by your own dog. Ugh. The next day, Susie tells Madame Blanc about the words secret and iris that Pat said the night she died. Weird, right? Turns out Pat and Sarah were friends. Pat was the one Sarah was talking to when she left the school. Pat was spying on the teachers for being involved with something nasty, and she left notes behind, and Sarah and Susie can read them together tonight. But at night, Sarah is drugged by the wine again. Susie, do you know anything about witches? Sarah asks. Susie falls asleep, and Sarah goes alone to follow the footsteps of the teachers. She gets locked out of the sleeping area by mistake and tries to get back or at least hide from anyone out and about, and finds a hidden panel in the wall. And there's someone in the room and she's attacked and she hides behind the panel. Someone's trying to fiddle with the door lock to get in, and Sarah sees a window at the back of the room. She stacks some boxes and climbs them and gets out the window, but falls right into a pit of razor wire, which is definitely an OSHA problem. But this is Italy. They don't have that kind of thing. And she gets stuck in the wire and is stabbed by the arm with the knife. The next day, Susie's told Sarah suddenly quit school and packed up and left. But that doesn't sound right. She calls a friend and ex-psychiatrist of Sarah, who happens to be Udo Kier, and they talk about Sarah, the school, and witches. Turns out the Tanz Academy was founded by Elena Marcos in 1895 as a dance and occult academy. Are you on the dance track or the occult track? That's a crazy combo for a school. They don't have cosmetology? Well, anyway, Marcos was called the Black Queen and feared by everyone as a powerful witch. In 1905, the school burned down and Marcos was said to have died in the fire. The school ended the occult portion of the program and continued as a ballet school. Udo Kier's friend, Professor Milius, says witches are bad, evil, do harm, acquire wealth, cause suffering, sickness, and death. That's established. Good. The leader of the coven is like the head of a snake, and she is going to be much more powerful than any of the lower witches. 100 times more powerful. That night, the school is empty. Everyone but Susie went to see the Bolshoi. She decides not to drink the wine they give her and pours it messily into the sink. It doesn't look like wine to me, but whatever. She's attacked by a bat in her room and gets in her hair, and she kills it with a stool and a blanket. She hears the teachers walking and remembers her conversation with Sarah. She counts the steps, then follows them. She comes to a wall that has flowers painted on them, and she remembers Pat's words, more of the words, secret and iris. And then she remembers you have to turn the blue iris to open the door. She does, and it does. She goes through the door, down the hall, which is all decorated in occult, Kabbalistic, and witchy writing and decor, and she goes, walking down the hall. It kind of looks like Fanny and Alexander back here. She makes her way to the back and sees Madame Blanc saying, "Make the American girl disappear." And then she says, "Eleanor, give me power, sickness, death, death, death." Susie then sees Sarah's dead and mangled body and runs. She stumbles into the Black Queen's bedroom, and she can tell by the snoring and the Dayglow peacock. Sarah spills some pool boys like you do and wakes the Black Queen, Elena Marcos. Marcos taunts Susie some and disappears and raises Sarah from the dead. Sarah attacks Susie, but as Marcos uses her powers, an outline forms around her. Susie stabs inside the outline, that's a way to color within the lines, and her stab hits its mark. Elena Marcos, the Black Queen witch, dies. The stuff in the building starts exploding and stuff, and Susie runs out of Dodge and into the woods as the school falls apart and the credits roll. Whew, The end. All right, Chris, tell us a little bit about Suspiria.
Oh, thanks, Prof. As per usual. Great summation with your little inside one-off comments. I love it. Good stuff there.
Yeah, you got to know what you know,
Yes. This is going to come off as very biased, and while the entire cast is talented and has various long credits, I'm just going to focus and highlight on the Americans in the cast. Jessica Harper, who played Susie, also appeared in Phantom of the Paradise, Stardust Memories, and Pennies from Heaven. She turned down a part in Annie Hall, I wonder which part, to appear in this movie. She is currently age 76. Joan Bennett, who played Madame Blanc, started her film career in the silent era. She played the mother in the Spencer Tracy Elizabeth Taylor movies Father of the Bride and Father's Little Dividend. This movie, though, was her last film. She passed away at age 80 in 1990. As previously stated, this is an Italian film and directed by Dario Argento, who co-wrote the screenplay with Daria Nicoldi, partially based on Tomas de Quincey's 1845 essay, Suspiria de Profundis. It inspired the 2018 film of the same name that had in its cast Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton, and Chloe Grace Moretz. Nearly all of the dialogue was dubbed in English in post-production, though I've seen some conflicting information as to who was dubbed and who wasn't here and there. The Italian progressive rock band Goblin, and what a name for a group, composed most of the film's score in collaboration with Argento himself. The film is available on YouTube at the time of this recording. However, personally, I did see it on Zumo, but when I went to look for it again, I couldn't find it. So YouTube would probably be your safest bet. Let's talk about rankings. The Village Voice ranks Suspiria number 100 in their list of 100 greatest films made in the 20th century. Gee, I wonder what was 101.
Yeah,
It didn't make the cut. Adam Smith of Empire Magazine awarded the film a perfect score 5 out of 5. Empire Magazine also ranked Suspiria number 312 in their list of 500 greatest films ever, as well as number 45 in the list of the 100 best films of world cinema. AllMovie called it, quote, one of the most striking assaults on the senses ever to be committed to celluloid. The unrelenting tale of the supernatural was, and likely still is, the closest the filmmaker will ever come to capturing a nightmare on film. Entertainment Weekly ranks Suspiria number 18 on their list of the 25 scariest films ever. A poll of critics on Total Film ranked it number 3 on their list of the 50 greatest horror films. One of the film's sequences was ranked number 24 in Bravo's, quote, the 100 Scariest Movie Moments program. IGN ranked it number 20 in their list of 25 best horror films. Let's talk about the color in the movie. I've seen some conflicting reports here. So per Wikipedia, Suspiria is noteworthy for several stylistic flourishes that have become Argento trademarks, particularly the use of set pieces, structures that allow the camera to linger on pronounced visual elements. Cinematographer Luciano Tovoli was hired by Argento to shoot the film based on the color film tests he had completed, which Argento felt matched his vision. And in part, it was inspired by, of all things, Snow White from Walt Disney back in 1937. The film was shot using anamorphic lenses. The production design and cinematography emphasized vivid primary colors, particularly red, creating a deliberately unrealistic, nightmarish setting emphasized by the use of ambition Technicolor prints. Commenting on the film's lush colors, Argento said, we were trying to reproduce the color in Walt Disney's Snow White. It has been said from the beginning, though, that Technicolor lacked the subdued shades, and it was without nuances, sort of like cutout cartoons. The ambition process that was used in films such as Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind is much more vivid in its color rendition than the emulsion-based release prints, therefore enhancing the nightmarish qualities of the film Argento intended to evoke. It was one of the final feature films to be processed in Technicolor using the last remaining machine in Rome. However, a little bit more different spin on this, per IMDb, they've said this: it is often assumed that to achieve the rich color palette, the film was shot using the outdated 3-strip Technicolor process. This was, in fact, not true. No film after the mid-1950s was shot using this method. The film was instead shot on normal Eastman color Kodak stock, then printed using the 3-step Technicolor process, utilizing one of the last remaining 3-step machines. This issue has been confusing somewhat by the fact that in the 25th anniversary documentary featured in the 3-disc DVD set, a discussion of the printing process and cinematographer Luciano Tovoli was followed by a diagram showing the 3-step camera. This is part of a trilogy called The Three Mothers. Suspiria was first from 1977. It was followed by Inferno from 1980. And then lastly, The Mother of Tears in 2007. And I confessed I have not seen any of these other films. Okay. Prof, let's take a step back. What were your initial reactions in watching Suspiria?
So I've seen Suspiria before. It's been quite a while, though, like a decade or more. And as I'm rewatching it, and remember, I'm watching this movie now kind of more analytically, I'm watching it for this podcast instead of just for enjoyment. And I'm also watching it next to a lot of other horror movies. We're recording, watching like multiple horror movies at a time right now. And it's really tempting to compare them to each other. So this, for me, Suspiria has the feel, even though this was done in 77, this kind of feels like an 80s horror movie for me. It's got these set pieces that, Chris, you mentioned, these death set pieces, the woman hung through the glass ceiling, the razor wire scene with Sarah kind of trying to escape, the maggots coming down, the dog attack, that whole scene. These are all definite set pieces that take a lot of time, that take a lot of the screen time of this movie. And so the horror isn't necessarily in between the set pieces all the time. So you mentioned a couple of times about the colors in this movie. Now, personally, I absolutely love colors in movies and comics. This is like the red shoes for me a little bit. And combined with the set design, there's Art Nouveau, designs in the hallways in the school and stuff. And it's got this like really kind of Euro trash 70s wallpaper. I mentioned the red hallway. The rich blue main room of the school. There's one shot where there's a rich green light behind the red-haired Sarah, which looks really stark. Susie's room, there's one shot. Susie's room is lit in blue. The door is open so you can see the red of the hallway behind her. Really, really powerful colors. Behind the iris door, there's a rich blue velvet curtain, very Lynchian kind of looking, but blue instead of red in this case. The blood is this red, gooey, fake-looking Hammer horror blood. And so that was kind of cool, seeing like something that reminded me of a horror element. Joan Bennett, great to see Elizabeth Stoddard from Dark Shadows. Loved seeing her in another movie. I think she was kind of underused a little bit, but she was menacing for sure. Loved the soundtrack, Goblin and Argento, and sometimes it felt like the soundtrack was responsible for half the body count in the movie. And one thing I noticed in the kind of action scene, when you walk through a door, you're trying to be stealthy, and you walk through a door and you open the door and go through it. And then as you go on, you leave the door open behind you. And that always gives me a creepy feeling like, oh, somebody's going to know somebody's out and around, It feels like you're putting yourself in even more danger. And I like all those little subtle things that Argento does in this movie to increase I don't want to say tension, but the unease. Chris, what are some of your first impressions about Suspiria?
Thanks, Prof. I like the European feel and vibe of this movie from the onset. We've got this poor woman leaving the airport. It's a downpour, and she's trying to hail a cab. And a couple of cabbies pass her, and then eventually one pulls over, and it's the gruffest cabbie you could possibly find on a rainy night. And when we reach the destination, he doesn't get out of the cab when Susie asks for help, either loading it or unloading, and he just stays there. And I just thought, this is the world we're in. Okay, fine, get it. Prof, like you, I also got an 80s horror movie vibe to this. There were the close-ups, the framing, and the music, and it seems like I almost was lost in what decade this is, because for me, there's a certain vibe and aesthetic to 80s horror movies that are kind of entrenched in my mind. I can't quite put my finger on some of the necessary things with the way it's shot, the way it's looked, the way the music is, and it all seems to kind of blend that way. Same with the 70s movies. I have a certain vibe and a feel and a mindset for watching 70s horror movies, that they all sort of hit these sort of little notes with the way it's shot, the lighting, what have you, in respect to that. But yeah, this is made in 77, but yet it sort of had an 80s vibe to me here. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I liked that this wasn't necessarily a slow burn horror movie per se. We've got a lot of little jump scares as this movie amps up. And I really like that we got some good creepy moments from the onset. I was watching this, and I can't remember the last time I saw Jessica Harper in something, and she really seems to carry this movie a lot. And she sort of has this ingenue vibe to her. And it's not quite wayfish, but it's pretty close. And I like that line she toes in this. She's strong-willed in some places, but yet she's kind of not sure what to do in some scenarios. Prof, I'm piggybacking on a lot of what you said, but I think you really hit on some things, so I'm going to just echo the sentiments. The wallpaper, my gosh, some of the wallpaper in these scenes were just so chaotic and mesmerizing in some of these rooms. I liked the set. I like that you said Lynchian in some of these things, and particularly one thing where we are going with the character through a door, and we see this weird, odd or staircase that sort of meets in the middle. It's sort of both meeting at a diagonal. And I thought, wow, that does kind of remind me of David Lynch a little bit with how these sort of steps meet at the corner. Where do they lead and where do they go? So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. Prof, we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive in the next phase of our discussion. So I'm going to take a step back, like you take the floor. What were some of your favorite movie moments throughout this movie?
All right. Talking about Lynchianness, I think that's definitely part of what I like about this movie, is how, clearly Lynch was inspired by Argento and things like that. And I remember seeing a interview or a shot with Lynch was shooting a scene. And somebody commented to him, it's like, well, how long is this scene going to be? And he just looked at him astonished, like, who cares how long it's going to be? It's powerful. And that's one thing that really stuck in my mind as I was thinking about that red hallway scene, that movie moment where Susie is walking down this hallway and gets the mirror flash in her eyes and hears witch, and she's going down this very Art Nouveau hallway, red, powerfully red, and she's like dizzy and kind of getting out of it. She's like under a spell, and that whole walk down that hallway, it just was so powerful to me, and just was one of my favorite moments of the movie. And also in the beginning, as Susie's coming to the school for the first time, the cab is driving through a forest, and the camera is kind of panning, and you have all these very straight, up and down trees. And as the cab is driving on the other side of the trees and the camera's following it, you see the pattern of all these trees going by. It's very stark, very cool. And then the other moment that I really loved was when everybody was sleeping in the gym. All the shadows on the sheets, definitely red light coming. And, the Black Queen came and laid down in her cot, and you can see her kind of strangely behind the sheet. I thought that was a very effective scene for me, as they're whispering. They're trying to whisper and not be heard. But, of course everybody can hear you. It's a gymnasium. I thought all of those scenes were extraordinarily effective. How about you, Chris? What are some of your favorite movie moments in Suspiria?
Thanks, Prof. I hate to circle back to this, but I've noticed a trend in some of the podcasts that we've been doing this. I've sort of stumbled upon these connections to Batman, be it with the actors or the production itself, be it the 60s TV series or the movie. Now, I can't find a single one of it here, but I will say this. In the opening credits of the 1966 Batman movie, you have these different color palettes that were lit on the actors as they were being introduced. When they show Adam West for the first time, he's lit in blue. When they show Burt Ward for the first time, he's lit in yellow. Cesar Romero, I think, was lit in pink. Frank Gorshin was lit in green. And there were so many cool scenes with Suspiria, with how this movie was lit, and especially with the reds. They really amped up a horrifying presence, and not just reds, but they used some green, they used some blue, but just these primary colors. Prof, you also said the dormitory scene, and I'm going to echo on that one as well, because we have this transition where it's all matter of fact that, well, look, the guys went to the trouble of putting some beds in this room. Of course, naturally, if you want to stay at a hotel for the night, you can do that, but it's late at the hour, so why not stay here? And it seems innocuous enough. And the lighting is just normal and safe. And then all of a sudden, when the lights go off, boom, we're immersed in this red. And all of a sudden, from feeling normal and safe, boom, we get this weird, ominous peril feeling. And I like how this transition was made. And it was so subtle, but then all of a sudden it becomes very dramatic and drastic all within a second. And I love that. There were some great jump scare moments in this, the maggots, some gruesome deaths, and just the way we see some of the bodies with, spoiler, glass shards being put in some of these people's faces. Yep. Very, very cleverly and creatively shot. And I have to really applaud the creative team with respect to that. Prof, I'm sure we're going to mention the music. Wow, it was really good. And they really just don't let up. I mean, this music is pulsating, and I cannot understate how often it was used, how loud it was used, and how it just sustained itself from scene after scene after scene. It's pulsating, it's creepy, and they will not let up. There's a scene towards the end where Susie hears this ominous voice behind the door, challenging her to open it. And even the hand comes out from behind, even beckoning her. Where did this come from? I love these little moments that they had with respect to that. Good stuff here. Very creatively done. Prof, there is also a bit, and I don't know if this is necessarily a discussion question, but I'm going to put it out here for now. At the conclusion of the film, the building is on fire, and we see everybody presumably meeting their peril and their death. And Susie then leaves the building, and she sort of has this weird smile on her face. And I don't know if it's a smile of relief, but it's sort of creepy the way she does it, because it almost seems like she's possessed in a way. And I don't know if I'm misreading this or not, but she has this kind of weird smile, and I just can't. There's a smile of relief, but there's also another smile that's sort of like creepy. And I don't know if this was a deliberate thing on her action or the direction, but there it was. Maybe we'll circle back to that.
Yeah.
Prof, in a lot of these movies that we've talked about, there seems to be a requisite creepy guy wearing dark glasses, and this film was no exception. But that said, I like that we kind of do a little bit of a pivot here, because he's a sympathetic character. We learn that he's blind. He plays the piano very well. And later, in a very graphic scene, his dog turns on him and he's basically ripping his throat out in a very graphic manner. And they linger on this shot for more than one or two beats. Yep. And I like how we did this pivot with the dark guy wearing glasses, and here it is. And it just was immersive here. Prof, just a little, I don't know if I'd call them nitpicks or just things that I had as necessarily one-off observations. I am not well versed necessarily with respect to ballet, but there's a scene where Susie doesn't have her shoes with her, and someone in the cast says, "Oh, you can borrow someone else's for the day." Is it a one-size-fits-all? Is she wearing a slipper, or is she actually wearing a shoe? And I'm thinking, how do we know they're all the same size? I can't. What's going on here? And all throughout this movie, there's also this, in the background, there's this sort of this little Lord Fauntleroy boy, and I don't know what he's up to, and I don't know what he's there. He's sort of wearing clothes that seem to be from the 1800s, if you will, yeah. And he's sort of got this page boy haircut. I have no idea what his presence is. I have no idea why he's there. I don't know if he's sort of like an assistant to the madam or what's going on here, but he's in on what's going on, because when Madame Block says, "Oh, we have to kill the American woman," he's right there and he's in on it. Sometimes he's whispering things to other people. Who is he and what's he doing there? And why is he being protected? And I thought that we were led to think that this character got severely attacked by the dog, but I don't see any after effect with this. And who is this little kid? I have no idea, but at any rate, I digress. All in all, a great movie, but just some little internal questions I had while I was watching this.
Yeah, I have two comments. I have no idea who that little boy was. I always, I guess, assumed it was either Madame Blanc or the Black Queen's kid. I don't know, though. No idea. And I absolutely love that you made that comment about that little smile that Susie gives when she leaves the building and the credits start to roll. And I have to say, I have no reason to believe this, but what I thought last night when I was watching it and saw that little smile was that Jessica Harper was glad the movie was finally over. And I have no idea if that's...
And Prof, you do bring up a good point, because there was a lot of... so much trivia, and I sort of have to kind of cull what to put on the script and cull what not. But there was numerous accounts where she had a lot of difficulty communicating with either the director or other members of the cast, because they spoke different languages. Yep. Some of them it was German, some of it was Italian. And there was one bit where she was talking to an old man, and the old man had to basically, when he was done speaking in his native tongue, and Jessica couldn't understand him, he would basically off screen, he would kind of tap her foot as to say, that's your cue. Yeah. And so she definitely had a lot of challenges in making the film, the least of which was probably the communication.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, about the dubbing of these movies. So Italian movies have a different process than American movies. And I learned this from the spaghetti Western movies that I watch sometimes, that the actors generally speak their lines in the language that they're most comfortable in. So presumably Jessica Harper would have been in English, other people would have been in Italian, other people would have been in German, and not all actors really like that, right? You're giving your lines, and then somebody says their response line in another language, and you don't understand what they just said, but you as an actor are supposed to be reacting to it in an appropriate way, and it's very, very challenging for some actors. And of course, then you also have the technical... It's obvious when you watch an Italian movie that all these lines are dubbed. The technical, dubbing technology isn't great. Did you find that was a problem as you watched this movie?
Prof, I probably in the initial 5 minutes, and then after that, I sort of resigned to it and settled in with it. I would say probably watching a Japanese kaiju film is maybe a little more distracting, as if we're going to gauge with the level of things being said and some of the words just not matching the mouth. Yeah. I was okay with it. Prof, was it a huge distraction for you, or did you kind of get, like me, after 5 minutes, you're kind of good to go, or did you have some problems here and there?
I sunk into it. I think very similar to you. It was like at the beginning, you're like, oh yeah, this is an Italian movie. But I've watched an awful lot of spaghetti Westerns, and I'm pretty used to Italian filmmaking. So I sink into it. It's okay. Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about the set pieces of the death. So we have the hanging of the woman Pat at the beginning, coming through the kind of Tiffany ceiling window. You have Sarah falling into the razor wire, and then you have the dog attack. I think those are all the big set piece deaths. What did you think about them kind of relative to 70s movies versus, to me, it seemed much more, because of the set pieces, much more like an 80s movie than a 70s movie. What was your kind of thinking about how those set pieces went?
I think Prof. Argento is telling me as a viewer he's not holding anything back, and particularly with the hanging, because this is a spectacular scene as it's framed and as it's depicted. It's graphic, and he's letting you as the viewer saying, this is what you're in for, by the way. So if you have any reservations about leaving or being scared or wanting to take off, we're letting you know now this is what's going to happen, and this is what you're going to be immersed with. Yeah. The dog attack, to circle back to that one, like I think I previously stated, I think it kind of lingered for one or two beats too many. And I think, okay, I get it. I know what's happening to this guy. You don't have to stay here. But no, Argento's not moving off of this until we see that a couple of passersby stumble upon him and offer help. The razor wire, that was probably as graphic as it was, and it stuck the landing, yes, but I think I sort of had my problems with this one out of the three that we're talking about, is like, what's all this razor wire doing there to start with in the first place? Because it seems like this was not a really conspicuous place for this to be on the onset for the victim to fall in and meet the peril and then subsequent demise. What is it doing there? Now, the dog I can see, the hanging I can see, because we sort of had like these death props, if you will, attached more or less close by to the victim. The razor wire, that was a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but as far as the other deaths go in this film, yes, it was spectacular and glorious, and then we have it. Prof, I throw it back to you. What did you think of the particular death set pieces? Did one say, oh my gosh, and was one more creepier than the other, or were they all pretty effectively done in your mind and opinion?
I think the most effective one was the hanging scene, right? It's right at the beginning of the movie as you're sinking into this movie and you're like you said, Argento was saying, are you guys ready? We've got a movie for you. And I thought that was pretty effective because it wasn't only a hanging. It was also the woman she was staying with is like realizing something is going on and she's freaking out and she's saying, help, help, help. And she's banging on doors in the apartment building and trying to raise some help and nobody comes. I thought that whole scene was really effective. The razor wire scene, like, why would you have a room full of razor wire? Is it a trap in case somebody gets through? It was implausible why this room exists. But I thought, well, if it does exist, this is a pretty good way to get rid of Sarah because she's stuck to it. And I thought it was effective and freaky, but completely implausible. I liked, and in the dog attack, what I really liked, the Daniel goes out with his seeing eye dog, and they go out into this plaza, and the soundtrack just cranks up. Just something is bad, and Daniel knows something is bad, and the dog knows something is bad, and you're looking out around this plaza, and you don't see anybody coming, and you're like, oh, well, Daniel's probably fine. Nobody's coming. And then his dog kills him. I thought that was a shock, like a surprise. So I think it was a little like, showing the dog biting his neck in the blood and everything. I don't think visually it was so great, but I think from a plot and unexpected attack, it was awesome. So I thought that was pretty good. The story here, very basic. Right? Woman comes to ballet school. There are witches. There are problems. She kills the witch and leaves. But along the way, there's a lot of sensations. There's vivid colors. There's sound. And that's not only the music, but the whole sound design, the whispers, witch, 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 the pounding, incessant rhythms. We mentioned the patterns, the wallpaper, the room architectures. These rooms are built with architectural elements that don't make any sense, but are beautiful. All these are kind of nightmare spaces. So for me, this is much less about a story and more like a nightmare where you're just being brought through places, through these rooms, through these crazy spaces that are just scary in themselves and not scary because of the plot. What are some of your thinkings of the kind of story versus the kind of visceral experience of this movie?
Prof, I applaud you for bringing this up because as you were speaking, I really didn't have much to say or contribute about it, but I was thinking about this for a beat or two. And let's look at the setting. It's a ballet school, and these are all women. How many movies have we seen where we didn't have sort of a forced romance, be it homo, hetero, or succubus, in all of these movies that were sort of shoehorned into the plot? But we don't have that here, and I really applaud that choice because it could have really leaned that way, but it didn't. We had one scene where Susie and the other character was in the swimming pool together, and I think in the hands of another director or another storyteller, they would have maybe forced it to go in another direction, but they didn't do that here, and I like that. This was very, very minimal, as you say, but I think it was very effectively done in a less is more setting. And I think some of the things that we talked about with respect to the setting itself, Prof, you really captured something here by looking at the architecture of these places, the wallpaper, and just the space itself, and letting that tell the story and letting that kind of breathe a little bit more into the atmosphere and how it's done. And I think that was a little subtle move here and there, and just pulling things back and not force feeding us certain things of elements of storytelling kind of made it a little more different and just a more effective watch for me, because I think possibly we've seen so many of these movies where we're force fed a relationship, whether the audience or the viewer myself wanted it or not. And I think it's a good point, because at first when I looked at the script, I really wasn't sure what you were driving at when you say story versus sensation. But as you expanded on that point, now I think you're onto something there, and I have to applaud you for that.
Oh. You make a really good point. There's no romance. I think Susie has her eye on one of the male dancers, but it doesn't really develop into anything. He's hardly in the movie at all. So yeah, that's a really good point. This is like, it lacks some critical storytelling elements that other horror movies generally have, but cranks up the art design. All right, Chris. So how would you rate? I don't really like rating these movies, but how would you rate or rank or establish how good or not good Suspiria is?
Well, I think Suspiria was ahead of its time in certain elements, Prof, because this is a movie set in 1977, and I'm taking it from my own point of view and my own background as to gauge this. And I thought it was groundbreaking in certain elements with respect to the colors, the soundtrack, the music. It was kind of cool seeing a European horror movie for a change instead of, sorry, Hammer. Let me say that. So let me rephrase that. Say an Italian movie. Uh-huh. And coming at it that way and being groundbreaking, and I think of being an influential film, and seeing some of the other things sort of being draped on as horror movies evolved and went on its own course throughout the coming decade, I really liked it. The performances were very, very good. I thought Jessica Harper really did an outstanding job, and I kind of want to see her in other things now to kind of gauge her performances and what else she had done. And it's been a long time since I've seen the Phantom movie that she did with Paul Williams, so I kind of want to revisit that. I would probably say, Prof, I was going to give this, I will give it a B+, I think, for all the innovations it did, the effectiveness with respect to the jump scares being a little bit different. Mm-hmm. The maggot scene was very, very effective, I have to say. The how the shots were done with respect to the depths, the reanimation of a corpse, the witch scene towards the end of this movie. I don't know if I necessarily like the ending. I don't know if it necessarily stuck the landing, but when Jessica Harper gave us that smile, I thought, wow, that's really good. And I really am it sort of gave me that internal, the end question mark? I don't know, because I thought that was really good how it was done. So I'm going to give it a solid B+, and I will probably say, wow, an 8's too low and a 9's too high. So if I can cheat, I will probably say 8.5 out of 10 and a solid B+ for a letter grade. Prof, I'll throw it to you. What were your thoughts and impressions? I know we hate grading these things but nonetheless, it's something that we talk about. So I'll throw it back to you. What were your thoughts and impressions? And if you had to grade it, or if you just don't want to grade it and just leave it open there, I'll let you have that option. But what are your thoughts and impressions with respect to rating this film?
Well, I've always had a fondness for Suspiria. But you got to remember that I'm watching this movie analytically and watching it next to a bunch of other movies. In my opinion, some of the best horror movies ever made. And I kind of have always kind of carried Suspiria in that bucket of best horror movies. But now that I watch it and kind of compare it to some of the others, I see some seams in it. I mean, I think, we've talked about how this, although it was made in 1977, it feels like an 80s movie. So this movie is really, really ahead of its time, I think, in terms of horror movie. But I don't think that, I'm sure there are some silent movies out there that were ahead of their time and we still can't watch them today. So I think that on the one hand, the timing of the movie is interesting. I don't think it saves the movie from all of the issues of the era. And I think this is a very, very good movie and has a lot of things that I absolutely love. The colors, the art design, the music, and Susie as a character. But otherwise, it's thin. The plot is thin. The relationships are thin. I think this is an enjoyable movie. So, but I don't think its quality is on the level of like The Haunting, which we've also talked about. And I don't think for me personally, while it is enjoyable and visually stunning, I mean, that's why I love this movie. That's why this movie is on this list, for its visual effects. The reds and the blues and the greens and the wallpaper and the architecture. That's what really makes this movie feel like a nightmare and work for me. But, I don't really care about any of the characters except maybe Susie. And I don't really think I enjoy this movie as much as like Phantasm, although I think it's more visually stunning. None of the relationships are compelling. And in the balance, as I've talked about this before, of how much I enjoy a movie versus the quality of the film, I'd say the quality of the film drags this movie down a little bit. It's got, the set pieces, we look back and they're 80s kills, but done with 70s technology. And I think the quality drags the movie down a little bit. So part of that is definitely because I'm watching this movie analytically and not for just enjoyment, which is, I think this movie lends itself to just sitting and enjoying it, letting it wash over you. And I think I will try to give it a rating, but this time, looking at the movie analytically, I would give it a B. And it's a little too much like an 80s movie, and that's not for me necessarily a good thing. The 80s are not my favorite era of horror movies. The opposite. I think I don't like a lot of 80s horror movies, not like some people do. So I am going to drop this to a B. So this is, I think, the first horror movie, Chris, that you liked more than I did.
Shocker. Yeah, and it's totally subjective. I might have changed my mind a little bit down the road, or ratings aren't necessarily always set in stone. No. But yeah, I think perhaps after watching this one, I think right as of now, I like this one slightly more than you did. Just slightly.
Just slightly. Okay, well, thanks everyone for checking out Frenzy Frights. Check out our other shows, the Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review Twilight Zone episodes. Thanks for watching and listening.
Now is the portion of our show we'll reiterate some of the comments that we received on some of our past podcasts, along with giving some thank yous and some shout outs. We'll get a comment from Billy D, and I have to say I was really taken aback by this, because Billy D, I was floored, because you talk about a guy who's done podcasts on numerous horror movies.
Yeah.
I was so floored and kind of humbled to get a comment from Billy D, who does a great one. Billy D, I'm going to give you a plug in just a moment. But we talked about the film Burnt Offerings, and Billy D came with me saying, I really have been enjoying the new format of your guys' show. Thank you so much, Billy D. And I made a comment that I said, Burnt Offerings, maybe not the best title of a horror movie. And Billy D chimed in and said, yeah, Burnt Offerings is definitely not a fantastic name for that movie, with some smiley, laughy emojis. So Billy D, thank you so much. Billy D does a plethora of podcasts over on the Magazines and Monsters feed, where he will talk about a horror film. Sometimes it's a Hammer film, but just listening to Billy D critique a film and just pick out the nuances, does a fantastic job over on the Magazines and Monsters feed. So I was very floored and humbled to receive a comment from Billy D saying that he listened to the podcast and saying that he's been enjoying it. So I thank you, Billy D, and I doff my cap to you. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a plug in a few moments, but again, Magazines and Monsters is the feed where you can check Billy D out. We also got a couple of comments from Cat Victory. Well, we had a few podcasts, and Cat Victory is always right there whenever a new show drops. So thank you, Cat Victory. And on a recent Professor Frenzy Show podcast, we talked about the best indie comics of 2025. And Cat Victory says, hey, join me, Chris, and the Prof as they discuss the best of the best. Thank you, Cat Victory. Then Cat Victory came at us again when we talked about the Twilight Zone episode, A World of His Own. And Cat Victory stated, I once knew a guy whose hands disappeared. but he could never point a finger at what caused it. Very, very clever. Thank you, Cat Victory. Cat Victory continues to discover lots of disappearing stuff on this episode of Frenzy Faves with myself and the professor.
Awesome.
Got another nice comment from Anna Aya Plays 4529 when we talked about the Twilight Zone, A World of His Own. My favorite episode with a lot of hearts on there. Yeah, Prof, that was a good one. We talked briefly before the show. We talked with respect to the cast. Prof, you said, yeah, this was one of the few times we got to see Rod Serling in an episode. Yeah, some great recollections you had with that particular episode. Prof, is there anything else that stands out to you in that one? Was it Keenan Wynn?
Yeah, I think it was Keenan Wynn. Yeah. His performance was fantastic.
Indeed. We also heard from John Manfredi, 810, when we talked about the Twilight Zone episode, A World of His Own. This was a good episode, Professor, with a small appearance by Rod Serling near the end. And I think that's sort of what sealed it for me, too, because it was a little comical appearance. It was nice to see Rod kind of get in on it and have a little playful side. And it really kind of made the audience, at least me, smile when I saw that.
Yeah, me too, definitely.
We also heard from Gian Senzo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My apologies if I got that totally wrong. I'm so sorry. But when we talked about A World of His Own, the comment was, cool episode. And here, we really appreciate that.
For sure.
Well, with that, we'll move on to our roll call of likes and plugs and just acknowledgments of some really cool people out there. We'll start with the mascot of our show, Robin at Robin031. Robin. Robin, kiss for you. I love you. And thank you for being a huge influence in my life and for giving the strength to go on. We also heard from our friend Mikey, Two Sleeps at Two Sleeps Music. I want to give a shout out to Mikey, who puts on a free concert twice a week. And you might ask yourself, well, how is this possible? Well, on Sunday afternoons, go onto your computer or any device that you can access the internet, type in Two Sleeps Music Twitch TV, click the link, and at 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, you'll be immersed in a concert. Once you're there, click on the other internal link, then you can sign up to get involved in an interactive chat, and you will have access to a song list of well over 200 songs. Concerts typically last at least an hour or as long as it goes to get through the requests or through the raiders that might come on Twitch to also check out Mikey, a.k.a. Two Sleeps. Before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Kara, a.k.a. Karasaurus Rex, a.k.a. Kara, who does a lot of plate spinning behind the scenes, making sure the production goes off without a hitch. So shout out to Kara. Marvelous, marvelous stuff. So what might you hear? You might ask yourself, well, you might hear some Beatles, you might hear some Monkees, you might hear some Foo Fighters, you might hear some Tom Petty, possibly some Stray Cats, possibly, Jerry Reed, Johnny Cash. Who am I forgetting? There's a whole treasure trove of stuff out there. It's evolving because Mikey's experimenting with some of the new pieces that he has in his huge arsenal of instruments. So it's fun to see what he's playing with and tinkering and trying out along the way with some of the old standards, with some of the songs that he's done that are, I would say, I think there's a list of quote unquote audience favorites that we like to hear on a more frequent basis than some of the other songs. But there are a lot of great tunes. So please check it out. Inexpensive Patreon for $1 mere a month. You can get some original content. And the other concert is on Tuesday nights, same web address, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Thank you so much, Mikey. Hey, it's our buddy Randy. Now, he puts on robotic sketches that you can catch on Twitter at RandyLanders1 over on Blue Sky. You can find them at Frumpy Sketch Artist. Phenomenal stuff. Please, please check it out. And you can find a couple of those in a book, a couple of coloring books on Amazon as we speak that Randy's compiled and just done a marvelous job with. So please check out the Robotic Sketches coloring book on Amazon. And also, I don't want to steal thunder here, but you talk about a great podcast talking about movies. Please check out Soundtrack Alley, where Randy will look to see how music enhances a film. It could be any genre of film, be it horror or otherwise. So along with the film history, you can find out how music really brought the film to another level. But it's I got to say, Randy does a great job producing the show. And please, please check it out. Phenomenal stuff there, because I always look at it from a different lens after Randy puts out the history behind the film. And then I'll look at it with my ears a little more and just hearing, yeah, Randy made a good point with respect to that. Good stuff.
Yep.
That's our buddy Clinton, who does a podcast called Coffee and Comics. In that podcast, Clinton will look at a comic book in about the time it takes to down a cup of coffee. Occasionally, Clinton will have on a guest and ask some very fascinating questions. Now, not to be outdone, if time permits, Clinton will also do the Days of High Adventure. That's a sword and sorcery podcast. Fan Film Fridays, that one's over at the Longbox Crusade feed, but have no fear, because there's a whole treasure trove of some very awesome podcasts with our podcast friends on that. This past month, they concluded the 12 Days of Crusade Miss, which was a huge. And I have to say, thank you. Applause to everyone who was involved, be it the regular podcasters and the assorted guests. Did a marvelous job with that one. Great stuff over at the Longbox Crusade feed. You'll enjoy each and every show. And if time permits, that's where you'll find Clinton's Fan Film Fridays on that feed. Clinton also does Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Power Hour with John and Lane. I think I've got everybody covered there. Okay, Billy D, it's your turn. You're next up at bat. Magazines and Monsters, again, it was the main feed. Now, Billy D does a great job with looking at the Bronze Age horror movies, having on fantastic guests. Been catching up on some past shows where Billy D looked at Abominable Snowman film with Karen from Between the Pages. Good show. And he says, hey, Chris, I know you like Ed over at Teal Productions, and he joined me when we talked about the Jack Kirby Black Panther stuff, so please check out those episodes. And I said, wow, it's a great pairing, because I like Ed over at Teal Productions, and you have Billy D talking about some of these unheralded books from when I was a young wee little whippersnapper going to the 7-Eleven, getting these books off the spinner rack, and it just brings back the nostalgia feels. And Billy D always seems to find things that, man, I really love the deep dives in all of these great shows. Brave and the Bob, probably by default, is maybe my favorite one, because those look at the comics written by the zany Bob Haney. I think he had Gord talking about a recent episode of the Brave and the Bob, looking at a Brave and the Bold comic, looking at a team up with Wildcat, which was really well done. And I have to say, that was a great show. And I always say, Brave and the Bold was the primary Bob Haney stuff there. But yeah, he occasionally they'll look at World's Finest or maybe a Teen Titans, because Bob Haney didn't necessarily, stay in that one book, but there were some other books too. So I keep that in mind. But Billy D, thank you so much. Thank you for the high praise, and we really appreciate you chiming in.
Definitely.
It's listener emeritus, our friend Mac Rocks. It's our longtime supporter, D.S. May Collins. Thank you very much. Chris Hamby, thank you so much. It's our longtime friend, the Gringo. It's our friends, Darren and Ruth, over at the Rad Adventures Network, a whole treasure trove of podcasts there. It was fun to hear them guesting not too long ago over at the Longbox Crusade feed, where they looked at some Sherlock Holmes stuff there. It's our buddy Bill Beer from the Bat Pod. We appreciate that, along with him and Jade David, looking at Batman comics. Boy, I hope that's everyone. If I overlooked you, I feel terrible about it, so please let me know at BTO and Batbooks, or better still, to cover all the bases, let the prof know himself at Professor Frenzy. We'll be sure to mention you on our next show. Listeners, thank you very much for your time and listening.